Alright, so I wanted to make a follow-up to the last video I made. I got interrupted by a phone call. I ended off noting how our headwear, both the yarmulke that's worn in most Jewish places, and the Hasidic hats, the shtreimel, the flat hats, the bent-up hats, the hoiche hats, whatever, they all have this kind of the saucer shape, and perhaps that's related to the Indian of the Ifanim, the Chayes HaKodesh, and the Merkava. It's a theory. It's probably not so, but it might have some connection. It's interesting, though, how Dr. Greer mentioned that one of the beings that he encountered appeared to be wearing a yarmulke. It's interesting. I think also maybe the tefillin, also is connected to these type of things. So perhaps as well, something that angelic or otherworldly or extraterrestrial being might be donning. The talis also, we should notice, in the siddur, it says "Ve'ezke lechaluka derabanan." Talis no lo'olam haba. That there's a tefillah before putting on the talis, that the person should be worthy to what's called the rabbinical cloak and a nice talis in the world to come, in the merit of wearing a talis in this world. That it's part of our transition from this world to the next world is involved with the garments that we wear. Now, Rabbi Bar Tzadok from koshertorah.com, he said that the Chalukah Derabanan, which means a rabbinical cloak, is, in Kabbalistic terms, basically what the Western and Eastern different mystical schools call the astral body. Dr. Greer talks a lot about the astral body, but this is a term that you hear in a lot of meditation schools, out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming, things like that. the astral body, and the term, the Chalukah Derabanan, the rabbinical cloak, and the talis represents that. All of these things are connected in the meditative realm to all these ideas, to the body that, the spiritual body that we have, similar like how in Star Wars they have the Force body, the Force ghosts and things like that. So that's also to be mentioned there. So all this being said, I wanted to discuss briefly, I have to go back to work soon, but until that time, why have we not had disclosure? Well, I said Mount Sinai was disclosure. That was the ultimate disclosure event. But there's the powers that be that try to blind us from that. The Erev Rav, the basically forces in the world that God created for the purpose of challenging us so that we can be stronger by overcoming these challenges. And so, but when Mashiach comes, these things are going to be eliminated. And the Gemara says that when the Yetzer Hara, the devil, is killed, it says a parable that the righteous will look back and said, how is it that we conquered and overcame this? And the wicked will say, how come it is that we couldn't walk over this tiny little hair? Meaning, the purpose of all these challenges in the world is to make us stronger. It's like the drill sergeant who chews you out, who's rude to you, who's mean to you, for the purpose of you, like a personal trainer also trying to make you grow. This is the challenge of evil in the world, that can only be understood in authentic monotheism, like we discussed the video that I made on Isaiah 45, which is a very important video, is how everything ultimately comes from the one God who controls everything in the universe. Now, and that is why, like we said, disclosure, it's hiding in plain sight. Meaning, there are many people who say that if a disclosure event would happen, it would be the end of organized religion. But I say just the opposite. Although it depends on what aspects of religion. I remember my aunt told me, and this is a famous old saying, that God created man, but man created God. I mean, God created man in his own image, but then man created God in his own image. So much of theology is mistaken, quite often, the reason why there's so much atheism in the world, which there's not that much of, but the fact that there's any is quite fantastic and improbable. But the quote is Nachman Breslover once met an atheist, and he said, "The God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either." Meaning, if we think that God is just a guy sitting on the cloud in the Far Side cartoons, and he's running out of clay, so he decides to make snakes, like the guy with the beard and the big robe. That's not our God. We don't believe in that God. That's not who we worship. That's not who created the whole universe. There are indeed many spiritual beings that people mistakenly worship, and otherworldly beings, extraterrestrial beings that do exist, but do not deserve our worship. And people make the mistake, and that's where idolatry comes from, worshiping the creation instead of the creator. But all of those things are created by God, and therefore God fills all of those worlds, sustains all those worlds, surrounds all those worlds, but is much greater than all of that. Someone asked me recently, they said, well, if everything is God, so then how would there be a Avodah Zarah? And the thing is that if we make separations in God, so then my argument was that that's the greater Avodah Zarah because it's diminishing his oneness. The oneness of God is totally and perfectly one, to the point where there can be nothing, there's no place empty of him, or else that would be a diminishment in the essence of God himself, which is impossible and is a contradiction of God's oneness. Meaning that if that oneness was somehow diminished, but would be the oneness of God would be diminished if we say Tzimtzum Kipshuto. If we say that the idea is that, so how come we don't see God? Because God withdrew himself to make room for this world to exist. So the classical question is it Tzimtzum Kipshuto? Is there actually places where God does not exist? Or is it Tzimtzum Lav Kipshuto, that it's only a barrage? It's only an illusion that there are places devoid of God, but the fact is that God's essence fills all worlds and surrounds all worlds. The only difference, the only mistake that the classical pantheists make is to think that that's all there is, meaning that beyond this creation nothing exists. Meaning that's the problem with classical pantheism, is to say that God is the world, and they worship the world therefore, and that's not what we'll call the Hasidic monotheistic approach that many have called pantheistic, but it's not really pantheistic. Is that the Hasidic idea of Tzimtzum Lav Pshuto, the way I remember Rusher Wade described it like this. He said, you can imagine there's a sponge in the middle of the ocean. And the classical pantheists would say all there is the sponge and what's ever inside the sponge. And our understanding is, no, there's a whole ocean that's all around the sponge but also fills the sponge. But it's much bigger than the sponge is tiny and insignificant compared to the ocean. And of course that's a great understatement, because God is infinite and the ocean is finite. As big as the ocean is finite, and as big as the universe are finite. So the oneness of God, though, means that there can be no place that's devoid of Him. There can be no divisions in Him. He has no sides, no corners. There's no end to God. God is purely and totally infinite, and that's the essence of His oneness, is that He, like we say in the Hasidic and the Kabbalistic parlance, He surrounds all worlds and He fills all worlds. The Pisetzner said that the novel idea of the Hasidic theology is like this, that the Kabbalists taught that the essence of how much God surrounds all worlds and fills all worlds is that all of creation are vessels that are filled with the light of God. Like how this cup is not filled now, but it could be filled with water. So the Kabbalists would say that the water is the light of God, which fills the cup and surrounds the cup. Let's say, the cup, we're in the middle of the ocean. But the Hasidic theology revealed that the Dofnei Kalim is what the Pisetzner says, the actual walls of the cup, the actual cup itself, is also made out of God, so to speak. And it is. I mean, it's more than so to speak. It's literally true. I mean, God created the universe out of nothing, and God Himself is called the one who is without end, which is the same word. So yesh me'ayin means that God exists. He created the universe from nothing. I once heard that's Pshat me'ayin yavo Ezri in Psalm 121. It says, from where will my help come? We could say from ayin, from that, first from Ein Sof, from the God who is infinite, but also me'ayin, the fact that God created yesh me'ayin. You think it's going to be hard to climb up the mountain? The mountain's nothing. You think it's hard to do something? The whole world is nothing. There's only God. But God created this universe for the purpose of us to receive the reward that He wanted to give us. That's a basic Kabbalistic idea. So therefore, He created this universe for us to have challenges and to overcome the challenges. And that's why there's good and evil in the world, in order for us to have challenges and overcome them and to receive pleasure, the greatest pleasure being having communion with the one God. That God created the universe. Now this is the biggest mystery, I would say, in Jewish theology, is the Kabbalists will say that God is good, and the essence of the essence of goodness as we understand it is that to be good you have to do good to others. A man who's on an island by himself is no good to anybody, but a man who goes and a good man goes and does good to others. And so God created the universe so He could give, so He could do good to the universe, so He could provide goodness to us. Now that being said, the question is that something that's in the essence of God, or is it something that God created? And that's a mystery, because if it's in the essence of God, so it somehow diminishes God, because then He needs us, and that's a problem theologically. But it's neither here nor there. Now, all of this being said, we wanted to discuss, so why do we have this issue? I heard Tyler from Secure Team today, he he mentioned a billionaire who's involved in, I don't remember his name. He's involved in space exploration and so forth, and he said he's invested millions of dollars in proving the extraterrestrials. And they asked him on 60 Minutes yesterday, they said, do you, they said, so do you think, you're going to go on your spaceships and go meet extraterrestrials? And he said, we don't need to. They're here. They're right under our nose. Now, what does that mean? Now, we have to understand all of this. I mean, extraterrestrials exist just like we exist, just like animals exist, just like angels exist, just like demons exist, and so forth, just like the stars exist, just like this car exists, just like the grass and the flowers and everything exists. Meaning our existence before God is like nothing. But on the other hand, we exist as we exist to other human beings, and so we also exist to these in relationship to other intelligent forces in the universe that God also created. And like we said in the previous video, they are more aware of God than we are, because they're of higher intelligence and they were created in a more perfect form for that purpose, that of serving us. Meaning, we being imperfect, that's the perfection that God gave us as human beings, in order that we should strive for perfection through following God's will that was revealed during the great disclosure event at Sinai. And inasmuch that now, so we have the challenges of life to overcome. So God created these other beings for purposes, sometimes to challenge us and sometimes to aid us, to protect us, whatever the purpose is that God has in mind. But the arrogance of the human is that he thinks he created God. That's like the snake said to Adam, you'll become like God. He said, you'll be one of them. And that was the lie that the snake made to Adam. We can interpret that to mean that the mistake is that we think we created God. So like we mentioned in the movie Plan 9 from Outer Space, the alien was shocked and dismayed, and it was a very tender moment in that movie when the alien looks at the man, when the man like arrogantly says, you speak of God, and the alien is like tenderly, he says, you're so arrogant and you're so foolish and you're so stupid to think that we too could not have understanding of God. Meaning, when the man said that, it's like saying, well, someone who's advanced and scientific doesn't need God. And since these aliens are so advanced and scientific, God is not on their radar. Just us backwards humans, we invented this idea of God. When the fact of the matter is just the opposite. That the higher intelligent beings who are humbled, they don't have the arrogance of the human beings. Dr. Greer said it was, even though Gandhi was a controversial figure, and don't need to get into all the details, but the ideal that people talk of Gandhi, the legend of Gandhi, Dr. Greer talked about extraterrestrial ships being shot down and not retaliating, and he compared it to Gandhi blessing his assassin before he died. Meaning, we're supposed to overcome our stupidity, our arrogance. We're supposed to be humble. We're supposed to be servants of God, just like these beings are. They're all aware of the truth of the oneness of God. They are aware of the truth of Torah. And I think really that is why, especially the media, aspects of the government, certain aspects of organized religion, to a certain extent, the ones who created God in their image rather than recognize that we're in the image of God. Glenn Beck always talks about how the founders of America felt that they had to earn and strive to be on God's side. But by the time, I would say it started around Andrew Jackson, that time, they felt God is on our side unconditionally. And we could do whatever we want, and God is going to help us meet our manifest destiny. And that is the mistake that America made, and that's the cause of all of America's ills. Meaning the cure is to be humble and seek to be on God's side, and the mistake is to be so sure that God is on our side that we don't even need God to a certain point. That's what that leads to. And so too, that's what's going on here. The extraterrestrial beings are aware of the truth, and that's why the powers that be, the scientific establishment, the media establishment, the governmental establishment, and the military-industrial complex, and the governmental religions, the religions that are not about religious but that are tied to the government, want to keep this a secret. They want to keep it a secret because the fact is that when disclosure happens, it's going to prove the truth of God. It's going to prove the truth of the Bible. And it's going to be a big wake-up call, and that's the last thing they want. That's the last thing. And so those who, the Sabbateans, the others, the last thing they want is this revelation of what is really true. They want to keep it a secret. They want to keep it under wraps. They want to keep all of these truths quiet because they're going to lose out, and the powers that be, the financial powers that be, they're going to lose out. That's why they shut up Tesla. It's the same thing. That's why Carnegie ruined Tesla, because he knew he couldn't make money anymore. Carnegie, Rockefeller, Edison, all of them, because Tesla wanted to do it for the world. And these people just wanted to make money. Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money if that's what helps the world, but if they're hoarding money and keeping things from the world, that's what we call cronyism, and that's the opposite of capitalism. A lot of people make capitalism to be a bad word, but the real problem is this more government-controlled, socialistic, cronyist, what we call crony capitalism, where they create monopolies and so forth, and they prevent the free markets from operating. And so that's why the powers that be don't want disclosure, because they're going to lose all their power. They're going to show the emperor has no clothes. the Gemara, the Talmud says that in heaven, those who are below are above, and those who are above are below. But that the Torah scholars who are respected in this world are also respected in that world, meaning all other forms of honor will be reversed in the next world, except for the honor of serving God through the devotion of studying His Word. That's a deserved honor. And this is something, I mean, you read Kabbalistic books, you understand the different worlds and different beings that exist in these different worlds and how to channel them and how to communicate with them and the point of all of them is just Torah. Because that's the greatest truth in the world. And so, in a way, I think that's why the left has grabbed onto Kabbalah to study it, to pervert it. And meaning the source of today's left comes mostly from the followers of Shabbatai Tzvi and Jacob Frank, and that's led to the Zionist movement, to Marxism, to Freud, to the takeover of the judiciary here in America by Sabbatean and Frankist dynasties. A lot of the issues, and these can also be traced back to the Erev Rav, who, but in discussing that, the idea that we want to bring out here is that our job is to reveal the truth in the world, and that's why all throughout history, also the powers that be have said, don't, they don't want the world to know the truth of the Bible. I mean, look at how the government, until Gutenberg, until the printing press, the government, together with the church, did whatever they could to keep the Bible out of the hands of the masses. The Bible was something that was chained to the pulpit of the church, that the priests could read and nobody else. Now, the world has changed. But that was the most liberating event. Perhaps the invention of the printing press was one of the most liberating events in the past 1,000 years. And that's what set the wheels in motion for the creation of America and so forth. And by the Jews, it was always, we always had, when I say the Bible, I mean the Torah, the Tanakh, what the Christians call the Old Testament. It was expected for every Jew to be literate. And that was part of the reason why the Jews were persecuted so much, because they were standard bearers of the truth of Torah, truth that the Bible was true, not just a game, not just a club, not just somewhere you went once a week so the priests could make money. And I once heard and I don't mean this to be anti-Catholic, because I once heard a Catholic deacon say that the Protestant Reformation was the best thing for the Catholic Church, because it woke them up to realize, and we have the same problem in Judaism, like I said, mostly from these Frankist and Sabbatean groups that have perverted the truth of Torah, taken our holiest works and turned them on their head. And since so many of those groups, particularly from people who call themselves Jewish, but don't follow Torah at all, they are the most. They're involved in the media, the news media, the print media, Hollywood, and other powers that be, the financial world, and all of these things, the judiciary. These entities are trying to fight against the revelation of this truth. And that's why there's so much anti-Orthodox bigotry from the secular Jewish left. I mean, we see it locally in upstate New York. All kinds of false accusations and all kinds of things coming from the Jewish left, all of whom hate Donald Trump, and they hate the Hasidic Jews. And they really hate America. That's what it's really down to. And they really hate God. They really hate the Bible. They really hate Torah. And and their whole empire will be crushed when the truth comes out that there's one God who gave us a Torah, who created myriads upon myriads of worlds, physical worlds, spiritual worlds, all kinds of things, and all of these things are well known and have been well known for thousands of years, but there's been an effort to wipe it out. Now, not all these things are obvious to everybody for many reasons. I mean, even in the simple, straightforward physical world, the three dimensions that we're aware of scientifically, there are so many things that exist that we never see. I mean, I live in upstate New York, rural area. Deer, you see almost on a daily basis. But there are other animals. There are porcupines, there are raccoons, there are possums, there are foxes, there are coyotes, there are bears, there are bobcats. And those creatures are more elusive. And some you see more often. You'll see every now and then a possum. A little bit less often a porcupine. A little bit less often a fox or raccoon. You almost never see a coyote. Maybe, though, you see coyotes maybe more often than you see bears. And I don't think I've ever seen a bobcat in the wild, but I know they're out there. And there are claims there are other animals that are out there, whatever they are, ones that science says have become extinct in the wild here, like cougars, mountain lions, other things that science doubts their existence, Sasquatch and things like that, which have been known even in this area, like we said, for centuries, if not millennia. The native Lenape people who lived in this area were well aware. They had a different name for the being that is called Sasquatch in the Western, Pacific traditions, but the same being was known to the people who lived in this area. Excuse me. And with all that being said, and the other, all kinds, everyone, even if they didn't see them every day, people knew they were angels, people knew they were demons, people knew there were beings on other planets and other star systems. It was known to people all over the world that these things existed. You didn't see them every day, just like we don't see other of God's creations every day. We see squirrels every day and groundhogs in the season and so forth, but we don't see the bobcats, and we don't see the, people, even if they know what general area gorillas live in Africa, you have to be trained to know exactly where to go to find the communities of the gorillas, and all these other animals and plants and all kinds of things that exist in the world that God created. we are not always, we don't see them every day, but they exist. So certain ones science admits exist, and certain ones even with just as much proof. I hear about this, and I'm not going to talk about the whole living fossil issue with the coelacanth and everything. But how many people have seen a coelacanth alive in the ocean? You know, it's very hard to find a coelacanth. But science admits that it exists. There have probably been more people who have seen UFOs and even extraterrestrial beings than have ever seen the coelacanth. There probably have encountered angels, demons, jinn, you want to call them, shainim, zikim, all these different beings that God created. More people have had encounters with these things than they had with the coelacanth. It's a type of fish, coelacanth. And yet, the science recognizes coelacanth, and they don't recognize these other creatures. Of course, we understand the scientific method and so forth, and why. And there are certain things that have to be brought to bring proof. But even when these things have been brought, even when bodies have been found, and there's just poo-pooed away. The scientists just relegated, the mainstream scientists, even you can prove it with the scientific method. The mainstream, and when they find a hoax, they always play that up and give it a lot of attention. And they ignore other things that they don't have such a clear answer to. So, well, it's time for me to mosey on, go back to work. But that's what it's really all about here. I only got a few more minutes, but I better get going. That's why they want to keep all of these things under wraps and make fun of them, make jokes about them, and insult these things and so forth, because they're going to lose all their power when disclosure happens. But like Donald Trump said, the power is going to go back to the people now. We're going to take away the power from those powers that be that want to step on our power and strength, and instead the power is going to go back to the people to recognize that there's one God, and like Zechariah says, and God is going to be revealed to the world, all his holy angels with him, and there's going to be another revelation event in the end times. There's going to be another disclosure event, essentially, and then what's going to be, like we say every day, 3 times a day. Some communities say twice a day, some say 4 times a day on certain days. What Zechariah says, V'haya Hashem l'melech al kol ha'aretz Bayom ahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmei echad, that the Lord will be king over, and it will be that the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name shall be one. We're looking forward to that day very soon. That great revelation, that great disclosure event should come. Thank you, God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, and watch more of my videos. Thank you.